You are standing at the edge of a cliff, the wind whipping around you, the ground beneath your feet crumbling ever so slightly. Below, the ocean roars, its waves crashing against jagged rocks. You feel the weight of a decision pressing down on you, a decision that could change everything. Do you step back, retreating to the safety of solid ground, or do you leap, surrendering to the unknown? Your heart races, your palms sweat, and your mind screams in protest. But here's the twist. There is no cliff. There is no ocean. There are no rocks. The only thing real in this moment is the fear, the paralyzing, all-consuming fear that grips you, even though the danger exists only in your mind. Now, imagine this fear is not confined to this one moment. Imagine it seeping into every decision you make, from the mundane to the monumental. What to eat, what to wear, whom to love, what to believe, how to live. Each choice tinged with the shadow of what could go wrong. Fear whispers in your ear, shaping your actions, your dreams, your very identity. It tells you to play it safe, to avoid risks, to stay small. It convinces you that the unknown is your enemy, that failure is worse than stagnation. And so, you listen, you obey, you live a life that feels less like living and more like surviving. But here's the question, what if fear is not your protector? What if it is your jailer? This is the paradox of fear. It presents itself as a guardian, a voice of reason in a chaotic world. It claims to keep you safe, to shield you from harm. But in doing so, it robs you of something far more precious, your freedom, your ability to choose, to grow, to become. Fear does not protect you, it controls you. And the most unsettling part? You let it. You let it dictate your decisions, your relationships, your potential. You let it shrink your world until all that remains is a narrow, suffocating corridor of what-ifs and worst-case scenarios. But why? Why do we, as rational, self-aware beings, allow fear to wield such power over us? Why do we trade the vast, unpredictable beauty of life for the cold, sterile comfort of safety? The answer lies in the very fabric of our being. Fear is not just an emotion. It is a survival mechanism, hardwired into our brains over millions of years of evolution. It is the legacy of our ancestors who faced real and immediate threats, predators, famine, natural disasters. For them, fear was a matter of life and death. But here's the catch. The world has changed. The threats we face today are rarely life-threatening, yet our brains react as though they are. A disapproving glance, a missed deadline, a rejected proposal. These are not predators, but our minds treat them as such. The amygdala, the ancient part of our brain responsible for fear, does not distinguish between a saber-toothed tiger and a critical comment on social media. It sounds the alarm all the same, flooding our bodies with adrenaline, cortisol, and a primal urge to fight, flee, or freeze. And so, we find ourselves trapped in a modern-day paradox. A brain evolved for survival in a world that no longer exists, reacting to threats that are not truly threats. The result? A life governed by fear. Not the fear of death, but the fear of discomfort, of failure, of judgment. A life where the cliff is always there, even when it isn't. A life where the ocean below is not an invitation to dive into the unknown, but a warning to stay where it's safe. But what if there's another way? What if the cliff is not a threat, but a threshold? What if the ocean is not a danger, but a vast, unexplored frontier? What if fear, rather than being your enemy, is the key to unlocking your greatest potential? These questions linger, unanswered, as you stand at the edge of your imaginary cliff. The wind still howls, the ground still crumbles, and the ocean still roars. But now, there is something else, a flicker of curiosity, a spark of defiance. What if you didn't step back? What if you didn't leap? What if, instead, you stood still, faced the fear, and asked it what it was trying to tell you? What if the real danger was not the fall, but the refusal to jump, the refusal to live? This is where the journey begins, not with answers, but with questions, not with certainty, but with curiosity, not with fear, but with the courage to confront it. Because the truth is, fear will always be there. It will always whisper, always warn, always try to control. But it does not have to win. You do not have to obey. The question is, will you let it control your decisions, or will you decide to control it? The choice, as always, is yours. But before you make it, there is something you need to understand. Something hidden, something powerful, something that will change everything. And that is where we must go next. To understand why fear holds such dominion over our lives, we must first confront a truth so unsettling that it often remains buried beneath layers of denial and distraction. Fear is not merely an emotion. It is a construct, a story we tell ourselves. It is a narrative woven from the threads of our past experiences, our cultural conditioning, and our deepest insecurities. But who is the author of this story? And why do we keep reading it, even when it hurts us? The roots of fear run deep, intertwining with the very essence of what it means to be human. Carl Jung, the pioneering psychologist, once said, "Where love rules, there is no will to power, and where power predominates, there love is lacking. The one is the shadow of the other." In this profound observation lies a clue to the nature of fear. Fear, like power, is a shadow, a dark reflection of our unmet needs, our unhealed wounds, and our unfulfilled potential. It is the voice of the parts of ourselves we have disowned, the aspects of our being we have exiled to the corners of our psyche. And like all shadows, it grows larger in the absence of light. But what is this light? It is awareness. It is the courage to look inward, to confront the parts of ourselves we would rather ignore. It is the willingness to ask, what am I really afraid of? The answer, more often than not, is not the external threat, the failure, the rejection, the judgment, but the internal void it threatens to expose. Fear, at its core, is the fear of ourselves. It is the fear of our own inadequacy, our own vulnerability, our own mortality. It is the fear of confronting the truth that we are not as in control as we would like to believe. This truth is not new. Philosophers and thinkers throughout history have grappled with the nature of fear and its grip on the human soul. Friedrich Nietzsche, the existential provocateur, saw fear as a symptom of a deeper malaise, a lack of meaning. He believed that modern humanity, having killed God, metaphorically speaking, was left adrift in a universe devoid of inherent purpose. In this void, fear thrives. It becomes a substitute for meaning, a way to fill the existential emptiness with something, anything, that feels real. But this is a false comfort, a temporary salve for a wound that never truly heals. Arthur Schopenhauer, the philosopher of pessimism, took this idea even further. He argued that fear is not just a response to external threats, but a fundamental aspect of the human condition. Life, he believed, is inherently fraught with suffering, and fear is the mind's attempt to anticipate and avoid that suffering. But in doing so, it only perpetuates the cycle of pain. The more we fear suffering, the more we suffer. The more we try to control our lives, the more we realize how little control we actually have. It is a cruel irony, one that leaves us trapped in a prison of our own making. And yet, there is another layer to this problem, one that is perhaps even more insidious. Fear is not just a personal struggle, it is a societal force, a tool of control. Aldous Huxley, in his dystopian masterpiece Brave New World, envisioned a society where fear was replaced by pleasure, a world where people were so distracted by comfort and entertainment that they never questioned the systems that oppressed them. But Huxley's vision is only half the story. In our world, fear and pleasure are two sides of the same coin. We are kept in line not just by the promise of comfort, but by the threat of discomfort. We are manipulated not just by what we desire, but by what we dread. Jean-Paul Sartre, the existentialist philosopher, saw this dynamic clearly. He believed that fear is a form of bad faith, a way of avoiding the responsibility of freedom. To be human, according to Sartre, is to be condemned to freedom. We are free to choose, free to create, free to define ourselves. But this freedom is terrifying. It requires us to confront the uncertainty of existence, the ambiguity of meaning, the inevitability of death. And so, we turn to fear as a way of escaping this burden. We allow it to dictate our choices, to narrow our possibilities, to define our identities. In doing so, we betray our true nature, our capacity for authenticity, for courage, for transcendence. But here's the twist. Fear is not the enemy. It is not something to be eradicated, but something to be understood. Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor and founder of logotherapy, believe that fear, like suffering, can be a source of meaning. It is not the absence of fear that defines courage, but the willingness to act in spite of it. Frankl's experiences in the concentration camps taught him that even in the most dire circumstances, humans have the capacity to choose their response. Fear may be inevitable, but it is not insurmountable. It is not the end of the story, but the beginning. And so, we return to the question, why does fear control us? The answer is both simple and profound, because we let it. Because we have been conditioned to believe that fear is the truth, that it is the voice of reason, that it is the only way to survive. But this is a lie. Fear is not the truth. It is a distortion of the truth. It is not the voice of reason. It is the voice of the past. It is not the only way to survive. It is the surest way to stagnate. The real problem, then, is not fear itself, but our relationship to it. We have allowed fear to become the author of our story, the architect of our lives. But what if we could rewrite the script? What if we could reclaim our power, not by eliminating fear, but by understanding it? What if we could see fear not as a prison, but as a portal, a gateway to a deeper, truer, more authentic way of being? This is the challenge before us. To confront the hidden roots of fear, to unravel the stories we have been telling ourselves, to reclaim the light that has been obscured by the shadows. It is not an easy task, but it is a necessary one. Because the truth is, fear will always be there. It will always whisper, always warn, always try to control. But it does not have to win. You do not have to obey. The question is, will you let it control your decisions, or will you decide to control it? The choice, as always, is yours. But before you make it, there is something you need to see. Something that lies beneath the surface. Something that will change everything. And that is where we must go next. Imagine waking up one day and realizing that every decision you've ever made, every path you've chosen, every opportunity you've passed up, every dream you've abandoned, has been subtly, almost imperceptibly, shaped by fear. Not the kind of fear that screams in your face, but the kind that whispers in your ear, so softly that you mistake it for your own voice. It tells you to stay small, to avoid risks, to cling to what's familiar. And you listen, because why wouldn't you? It sounds so reasonable, so rational. But here's the truth. This fear is not your friend. It is a silent saboteur, a thief of potential, a sculptor of regret. The consequences of living a fear-driven life are not always obvious. They don't announce themselves with fanfare or drama. Instead, they accumulate slowly, like sediment at the bottom of a river, until one day you look up and realize you're stuck. You're living a life that feels smaller than it should, a life that feels like a compromise, a life that feels like someone else's. But how did this happen? How did fear, this invisible force, come to shape your reality so profoundly? The answer lies in the way fear interacts with your mind. Cognitive biases, those mental shortcuts that help you navigate the world, are particularly susceptible to fear's influence. Take the negativity bias, for example. This is the tendency to give more weight to negative experiences than positive ones. It's why a single criticism can overshadow 100 compliments, why a single failure can erase a lifetime of successes. Fear exploits this bias, amplifying the perceived risks of any decision and minimizing the potential rewards. It convinces you that the worst-case scenario is not just possible, but probable. And so, you play it safe. You avoid risks. You stay in your comfort zone. But here's the catch. The comfort zone is not a place of growth. It is a place of stagnation. And stagnation, over time, becomes a kind of death. Then there's the status quo bias, the tendency to prefer things to stay the same. Fear thrives on this bias, convincing you that change is dangerous, that the unknown is to be avoided at all costs. But the status quo is not neutral. It is not a safe harbor. It is a slow-moving current, pulling you further and further away from the life you truly want to live. And the longer you stay in it, the harder it becomes to break free. But fear doesn't just shape your decisions, it shapes your identity. Over time, the choices you make, or don't make, begin to define you. You become the person who always plays it safe, the person who avoids risks, the person who stays small. And the more you identify with this version of yourself, the harder it becomes to imagine being anything else. Fear becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, a feedback loop that reinforces itself with every decision, every hesitation, every retreat. And it's not just you. Fear shapes societies as well. It is the engine of conformity, the glue that holds systems of control together. Think about it. Why do people stay in jobs they hate, relationships that drain them, lives that feel empty? Because they're afraid. Afraid of failure, afraid of judgment, afraid of the unknown. And this fear is not accidental. It is cultivated, exploited, weaponized. Governments use fear to maintain order. Corporations use fear to sell products. Media outlets use fear to capture attention. Fear is the currency of control, and we are all complicit in its economy. But perhaps the most insidious consequence of fear is the way it distorts your perception of reality. Fear doesn't just make you avoid risks, it makes you see risks where they don't exist. It turns every opportunity into a threat, every challenge into a danger, every unknown into a monster. And in doing so, it shrinks your world. It narrows your horizons. It limits your possibilities. You begin to see life not as an adventure, but as a minefield. And the more you focus on avoiding the mines, the less you notice the beauty around you, the less you notice the life you're missing. This is the tragedy of fear. It doesn't just steal your present, it steals your future. It convinces you that the safest path is the best path, that the known is preferable to the unknown, that the life you have is the life you deserve. But this is a lie. The safest path is not the best path. The known is not always preferable to the unknown. And the life you have is not the life you deserve. It's the life you've settled for. And here's the hardest truth of all. Fear doesn't just shape your life, it shapes the lives of those around you. When you live in fear, you teach others to do the same. You pass on your anxieties, your limitations, your regrets. You become a mirror, reflecting the very fears you've internalized. And in doing so, you perpetuate the cycle. You become part of the problem, but it doesn't have to be this way. Fear may be powerful, but it is not invincible. It is not the final word. Beneath the layers of fear, beneath the stories it tells and the identities it creates, there is something else, something deeper, something truer. There is you, the real you. The you that is not defined by fear, not controlled by fear, not limited by fear. The you that is capable of courage, of growth, of transformation. The question is, how do you find this version of yourself? How do you break free from the unseen consequences of fear and reclaim your life? The answer lies not in eliminating fear, but in understanding it. Not in running from it, but in facing it. Not in letting it control you, but in learning to control it. This is the journey we must now embark on, a journey into the heart of fear, into the heart of yourself. It is not an easy journey, but it is a necessary one. Because the truth is, fear will always be there. It will always whisper, always warn, always try to control. But it does not have to win. You do not have to obey. The question is, will you let it control your decisions, or will you decide to control it? The choice, as always, is yours. But before you make it, there is something you need to discover, something that lies beyond fear, something that will change everything. And that is where we must go next. Imagine standing at the edge of that cliff again, the wind howling, the ground trembling beneath your feet. But this time, something is different. This time, you feel it, a spark of defiance, a flicker of rebellion. It starts as a whisper, barely audible over the roar of the ocean below, but it grows louder, stronger, until it becomes a roar of its own. No, it says, not this time, not anymore. And with that single word, something shifts. The fear is still there, but it no longer controls you. You are no longer its prisoner. You are its challenger. You are its conqueror. This is the moment of rebellion, the moment when you decide to break free from the grip of fear and reclaim your life. But how do you get here? How do you move from being controlled by fear to controlling it? The answer lies in a radical shift in perspective, one that challenges everything you thought you knew about fear, about yourself, about the world. The first step is to recognize that fear is not your enemy. It is not something to be eradicated, but something to be understood. Fear, at its core, is a signal, a warning, a call to attention. It is your body's way of telling you that something important is at stake. The problem is not the fear itself, but your relationship to it. When you see fear as a threat, you give it power. But when you see it as a teacher, you take that power back. This shift in perspective is not easy. It requires courage, curiosity, and a willingness to sit with discomfort. It requires you to ask, what is this fear trying to tell me? What is it protecting me from? What is it preventing me from doing? These questions are not just intellectual exercises. They are acts of rebellion. They challenge the narrative that fear has constructed, the story that it has been telling you. And in doing so, they open the door to a new way of being. But understanding fear is only the beginning. To truly break free, you must take action. You must confront the fears that have been holding you back, not with brute force, but with intention and awareness. This is where the concept of exposure therapy comes in, a psychological technique that involves gradually and systematically facing your fears in a controlled and supportive environment. The idea is not to overwhelm yourself, but to build resilience, to prove to yourself that you can handle discomfort, that you can survive uncertainty, that you can thrive in the face of fear. Start small. Identify a fear that has been limiting you, whether it's the fear of failure, the fear of rejection, or the fear of the unknown, and take one step toward confronting it. If you're afraid of public speaking, for example, start by speaking up in a small group. If you're afraid of failure, take on a project that challenges you, even if it's just a little. The key is to move toward your fear, not away from it. Each step you take, no matter how small, is an act of rebellion. Each step proves to yourself that you are stronger than your fear, that you are capable of more than you thought possible. But breaking free from fear is not just about confronting individual fears. It's about transforming your relationship to fear itself. This is where mindset shifts come into play. One of the most powerful shifts you can make is to reframe fear as a sign of growth. Think about it. When do you feel fear? When you're stepping out of your comfort zone, when you're trying something new, when you're pushing yourself to grow. Fear, in this sense, is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of courage. It's a sign that you're alive, that you're moving, that you're evolving. Another powerful mindset shift is to embrace uncertainty. Fear thrives on certainty, or rather, the illusion of certainty. It convinces you that if you just stay where you are, if you just avoid risks, you can control the outcome. But this is a lie. Life is inherently uncertain. The only thing you can control is how you respond to that uncertainty. When you embrace uncertainty, you take away fear's power. You stop trying to control the uncontrollable and start focusing on what you can control, your actions, your attitudes, your choices. But perhaps the most radical shift of all is to see fear as an opportunity. This is not just a platitude, it's a profound truth. Every fear you face, every challenge you overcome, is an opportunity to grow, to learn, to become more fully yourself. Think of the people you admire most, the ones who have achieved great things, who have lived boldly, who have made a difference in the world. Do you think they got there by avoiding fear? No, they got there by facing it, by embracing it, by using it as fuel for their journey. This is the essence of rebellion, not the absence of fear, but the refusal to let it control you. It's the decision to see fear not as a barrier, but as a bridge to a deeper, truer, more authentic way of being. It's the decision to take back your power, to reclaim your life, to rewrite your story. But breaking free from fear is not a one-time event. It's a lifelong practice. It requires vigilance, commitment, and a willingness to keep showing up, even when it's hard. It requires you to surround yourself with people who support your growth, who challenge your limits, who remind you of your strength. It requires you to cultivate habits of courage, of curiosity, of compassion for yourself and for others. And here's the most important thing: you don't have to do it alone. Throughout history, there have been countless examples of people who have broken free from fear and gone on to achieve extraordinary things. From Viktor Frankl, who found meaning in the midst of unimaginable suffering, to Malala Yousafzai, who stood up to oppression and became a global advocate for education, to everyday heroes who faced their fears with quiet courage and determination. These are your guides, your inspiration, your proof that it's possible. So, as you stand at the edge of that cliff, feeling the wind and hearing the roar of the ocean, remember this: the fear is not the enemy. The enemy is the belief that you are powerless, that you are small, that you are defined by your fears. The enemy is the story that fear has been telling you. But you are not that story. You are the author. You are the hero. You are the one who gets to decide what happens next. The choice, as always, is yours. But before you make it, there is one final truth you need to understand. A truth so powerful, so transformative, that it will change everything. And that is where we must go next. Imagine this. You are no longer standing at the edge of the cliff. You are no longer hearing the roar of the ocean or feeling the wind whip around you. Instead, you are standing in a vast, open field, the sun warm on your skin, the horizon stretching endlessly in every direction. The fear is still there, but it feels different now, smaller, quieter, almost insignificant. And then, in a moment of clarity, you realize something so profound that it takes your breath away. Fear is not the opposite of courage. Fear is the birthplace of courage. It is not the enemy of freedom, it is the gateway to freedom. And in that moment, everything changes. This is the ultimate truth about fear. It is not something to be conquered, but something to be embraced. It is not a barrier to your potential, but the very thing that unlocks it. Fear, at its core, is a call to action, a call to step into the unknown, to face the uncertain, to become more than you are. It is the fire that forges your strength, the storm that tests your resilience, the darkness that makes the light visible. Without fear, there can be no courage. Without fear, there can be no growth. Without fear, there can be no life. This realization is not just a philosophical insight. It is a paradigm shift. It redefines how you see fear, how you see yourself, how you see the world. It transforms fear from a prison into a playground, from a burden into a gift. And in doing so, it gives you something far more powerful than the absence of fear. It gives you the presence of possibility. But how do you get here? How do you move from seeing fear as a threat to seeing it as an opportunity? The answer lies in one final, most powerful realization. Fear is not about the future. It is about the present. It is not about what might happen. It is about what is happening right now. Fear, at its essence, is a response to the uncertainty of the present moment. It is your mind's attempt to control the uncontrollable, to predict the unpredictable, to avoid the unavoidable. But here's the truth. The present moment is all there is. The future is an illusion, a story your mind tells to make sense of the unknown. And the more you try to control it, the more you miss the beauty, the richness, the aliveness of the present. This is the ultimate rebellion, to let go of the need to control, to surrender to the uncertainty of the present, to embrace the fullness of life as it is, not as you wish it to be. It is not an easy task. It requires trust in yourself, trust in the process, trust in life itself. It requires vulnerability, the willingness to be open, to be raw, to be real. It requires presence, the ability to be here, now, fully and completely. But when you do this, something extraordinary happens. Fear loses its power. It no longer controls you, because you are no longer trying to control it. You are no longer fighting it, resisting it, running from it. You are simply being with it, observing it, allowing it to be. And in that allowing, you discover something incredible. Fear is not what you thought it was. It is not a monster. It is a messenger. It is not a wall. It is a doorway. It is not the end. It is the beginning. This is the ultimate truth. Fear is not your enemy. It is your ally. It is your teacher. It is your guide. It is the thing that pushes you to grow, to evolve, to become more fully yourself. And when you see it this way, everything changes. The cliff is no longer a threat. It is an invitation. The ocean is no longer a danger. It is a promise. The unknown is no longer something to be feared. It is something to be embraced. And so, as you stand in that vast, open field, feeling the sun on your skin and seeing the horizon stretch endlessly before you, you realize something else. You are not alone. You are part of something larger, something greater, something infinite. You are part of the human experience with all its beauty, its pain, its complexity. You are part of the dance of life with all its uncertainty, its unpredictability, its wonder. And in that realization, you find something even more powerful than courage. You find peace. This is the final, most powerful realization. Fear is not the end of the story. It is the beginning. It is not the thing that holds you back. It is the thing that propels you forward. It is not the thing that limits you. It is the thing that liberates you. And when you see it this way, when you embrace it this way, you become unstoppable. So, as you move forward from this moment, remember this: fear will always be there. It will always whisper, always warn, always try to control. But it does not have to win. You do not have to obey. You are the author of your story. You are the hero of your journey. You are the one who gets to decide what happens next. The choice, as always, is yours. But now, you see it differently. Now, you see it clearly. Now, you see it for what it truly is, not a prison, but a playground. Not a burden, but a gift. Not the end, but the beginning. And so, with that realization, you take a step forward, not in spite of fear, but because of it. Not to escape it, but to embrace it. Not to survive, but to thrive. And as you do, you feel it, the wind at your back, the sun on your face, the horizon calling your name. You feel it, the freedom, the possibility, the aliveness. You feel it, the life you were meant to live. And in that moment, you know, this is just the beginning.